4 islands, cold and mostly empty, sit in the fog off the northern tip of Japan. Fewer than 20,000 people live there, most of them Russian. On a clear day, fishermen on Hokkaido's coast can see them with the naked eye. And for more than 70 years, those islands have been the reason Japan and Russia have never signed a treaty formally ending World War II. Not North Korea and South Korea, not the two Koreas half-siblings in this series, Japan and Russia, two countries that have exchanged ambassadors, trade, and tourists for decades, and still, on paper, remain in a state left over from 1945 because of 4 pieces of volcanic rock neither side will let go of. Strip away the argument, and the sequence of events is not seriously disputed by either side. In February 1945 at Yalta, the US, Britain, and the USSR secretly agreed that if the Soviet Union entered the war against Japan, it would receive the Kuril Islands. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced it was accepting surrender between August 28 and September 5. After that announcement, Soviet forces landed on and occupied the 4 southernmost islands. In 1951, at San Francisco, Japan signed a peace treaty formally renouncing all right, title, and claim to the Kuril Islands. The Soviet Union refused to sign that treaty at all. No Japan-USSR, and later no Japan-Russia peace treaty has ever followed. Everyone agrees on these dates. What they don't agree on is what the word Kuril Islands actually means. The border here was drawn peacefully, twice, long before any of this. In 1855, the Treaty of Shimoda split the chain. Everything south of Etarofu was Japanese. Everything from Urupu northward was Russian. In 1875, Japan traded its claim to all of Sakhalin for the rest of the Kuril chain. A clean negotiated exchange, no war involved. For 90 years, this was simply where the border was. Then came 1904, a war Japan won, and 1945, a war Japan lost, and the map moved with the outcome. Yalta promised the islands to Stalin before the fighting for them even started. 6 years later, Japan renounced the Kurils at San Francisco without ever specifying exactly where that chain began. A single ambiguous phrase, written into a treaty the Soviets didn't even sign, is the gap the entire dispute still lives in. Japan's case rests on a single word: never. These 4 islands, Tokyo says, have never belonged to any country but Japan. Not part of the Kuril Islands it gave up in 1951, but a separate inherent Japanese territory that the 1855 treaty already recognized as such. The August 1945 landings, Japan argues, came after its surrender was already announced, making the occupation not a wartime conquest, but an unlawful seizure of territory from a country that had already laid down its arms. Even a declassified 1956 U.S. State Department memo is cited in Tokyo's defense, stating the islands have always been part of Japan proper. This isn't a fringe grievance. February 7 is a national holiday of protest, Northern Territories Day, backed by a standing government office, school textbooks, and now 3 generations of former island residents who still hold deeds to homes they've never been allowed to return to live in. Russia's case rests on a different word: consequence. Japan was an Axis aggressor state, Moscow says, and like Germany, it lost territory as a direct result of losing the war. That's not theft. That's how the post-war order was built, sealed by Yalta, Potsdam, and San Francisco alike. Etarofu and Kunashiri, Russian sources insist, are geographically and historically part of the Kuril chain, regardless of what Japan calls them. So Japan's 1951 renunciation already covers them, whether Tokyo likes the wording or not. And the islands are not sentimental to Moscow. They're strategic. The waters around them shelter Russia's Pacific submarine fleet, a protected bastion for its nuclear deterrent. In 2020, Russia amended its constitution to ban alienation of Russian territory outright. In 2022, it suspended peace treaty talks altogether. To Moscow, this was never really a negotiation to begin with. It was a settled outcome that Japan has simply refused to accept. So why, after 70 years, has nothing moved? 3 reasons stack on top of each other. First, geography did what it always does. The Sea of Okhotsk behind these islands is one of the only places on Earth where Russia can hide its ballistic missile submarines under ice cover undetected. Giving up the islands means giving up that shield. Second, law cuts both ways here in a way it usually doesn't. Both sides can point to a real treaty, and neither treaty settles the argument because the treaties themselves were written to be vague. Third, and quietly decisive, only one side has to say yes for this to end, and it's the side holding the territory. Japan can campaign, protest, and commemorate every February 7th for another 70 years. Without Russia's agreement, none of it moves the border an inch. If this dispute sounds structurally familiar, it should. Like Senkaku, it traces back to the same ambiguous sentence in the same 1951 San Francisco Treaty, a document that tried to redraw half of Asia's map in a single afternoon and left the fine print to be fought over for the next 70 years. But flip the roles, and something interesting happens. On Senkaku, Japan is the country in control, insisting there's no dispute at all. Here, Japan is the country locked out, insisting the dispute is very real and very unresolved. Same country, same treaty, opposite position, depending entirely on which side of the line it's standing on. It's not that Japan is inconsistent, it's that almost no country is consistent about this. Holding territory turns you into a no-dispute nation. Wanting territory turns you into a let's-negotiate nation. The map decides the argument before the argument even starts. Every dispute in this series so far has asked what history is made of, or who gets to decide what it means. This one asks a colder question. Does the law actually decide anything, or does it only decide things after power has already decided them first? Japan has the treaties, the maps, even a foreign government's memo on its side. It has never once had the power to make Russia act on any of it. Russia has the islands, the submarines, and a constitution that now forbids its own government from ever giving them back. And that, far more than any treaty clause, is what actually settles this. Maybe the uncomfortable truth is that international law isn't a referee standing above these disputes. It's a language the powerful use to describe outcomes they've already secured, and the powerless use to describe outcomes they can only hope for. 4 cold islands, still unreturned, a war still technically unfinished, and a question this channel keeps circling back to: whether history ever really ends, or just goes quiet for a while. Next time, we leave the Pacific behind and go inland, to a plateau, a flag, and a people whose entire argument is that they were never asked in the first place. Tibet. See you then.